Now, U.S. Senator Jim Risch recently raised serious concerns about a disturbing pattern unfolding in East Africa, that's the abduction and torture of activists and journalists. Now, among the most high-profile cases are Ugandan activist Agather Atuhaire and Kenyan photojournalist Boniface Mwangi, who were detained while monitoring the treason trial of Tanzanian opposition leader Tundu Lissu. There's also the troubling abduction of Tanzanian whistleblower Maria Sarungi Tsehai in Nairobi. All signs, he warns, of weakening institutions and a growing culture of impunity that could destabilize the region and affect U.S. interests. Now, human rights groups say that these are not isolated incidents. They see them as a part of a larger effort to silence dissent, even across borders, and a clear warning sign that civil liberties are being eroded in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Now, what happens to a society when fear replaces the right to speak out? Today, I'm joined by three guests. First of all, we have Abdurrahman Yusuf, a journalist and producer in Mogadishu, Somalia. We also have Abdullahi Alas, governance and policy analyst from Nairobi, Kenya, and Mabel Gebremedine, president of United Women of the Horn and Tigray Action Committee in New York, USA. Thank you so much for joining me on The Conversation. All right, so let me begin with you, Mabel. Now, we've actually seen a disturbing pattern of abductions and forced returns of activists across East Africa. How would you characterize the current state of civic space and freedom of expression within the region?
Well, it's a terrifying time, to be quite honest, and it's not something new. East Africa has been dealing with issues like this for a long while. I can speak for the country of Ethiopia. Journalists have not felt the freedom to really report on what's happening. Many have been expelled for the past 4 or 5 years. Just to speak about what's currently happening on the ground, women have experienced different forms of atrocities. Millions of women have experienced that throughout the Horn of Africa and further East Africa, and so it is a time that's not, most people don't feel very safe right now. They don't feel safe enough to speak up against the government. They don't feel safe enough to speak up against what's happening to them. People are not being held accountable, but again, this is not something new to East Africa. This is something that people have been experiencing for the past 4 to 5 years.
All right, now, while we wait for the other guests, Human Rights Watch East Africa's director warned that there's evidence suggesting that those who are abducting protesters and government critics are actually state agents. How credible is this assertion?
I would imagine it to be incredibly credible. This is something, again, that has been happening for the past 5 years. There's been very little media on it. There's been very little attention paid. But this is something that's been happening for a very, very long time, and it needs to change. Otherwise, East Africa will just continue to grow and grow and grow into despair.
Okay, but have you heard of any evidence, at all that supports the claim of direct state involvement, or any examples?
Absolutely. Again, back to Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government Ethiopian government was the one who was specifically, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was the one specifically causing all of these issues. And so, yes, the state is a part of the problem. The state is the actual problem. It is not necessarily the people on the ground that are doing this. It is the state itself. And so 1,000%.
All right, now let's hear from Abdullahi. I'm being told that he has joined us. Thank you so much for joining, Abdullahi. Can you hear me, Abdullahi?
Yeah.
All right, I can hear you now. So let's hear your thoughts on all of this. How would you characterize the current state of civic space and freedom of expression in East Africa?
Well, I think, first of all, here in Kenya, we have had 5 regimes, and Kenya has been struggling with people being abducted, political assassination, and then a lot of other killings that some people after today will not know what happened to them. So in this, we were supposed to be a better system, in terms of governing ourselves. Since we got independence, Kenya is almost 63 years. This regime of current president has been, silencing Kenyans. You remember in June, Kenya had Gen Z movements where parliament was, invaded. So I think it is a very bad thing, and we are not learning from when we got independence. We are not supposed to behave the way we behave. Democracies must allow people to voice themselves. Silence means people are either fearing or people are being threatened, and fear is used as a mechanism for the state to manipulate its people by making sure that they just implement their agendas, and that's not what we want as East Africa. You remember what happened in Dar es Salaam the other day when a Kenyan advocate was detained in the airport. Boniface Mwangi, who is my schoolmate, was also tortured. He has marks and massive injuries. This is not the East Africa we dreamt of. This is not the Africa we dreamt of. We want a place where people are free to talk and criticize their government. Africa, the problem we have is that people are fearing the state instead of the state fearing the people. So we are in a very trying times. Africa is going through turmoil. Some countries in Africa are going through destabilization, others are going through economic crisis. We know what's happening in Libya, in Somalia, in Congo, part of Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and all these other countries. So here in Kenya and in East Africa, we have regimes that are wrong. We have regimes that are wrong. This is what we call state terror. People are abducted, tortured, killed, maimed, disfigured in terms of state agency being used. And I would say we are in a very testing trying times in East Africa. This is not the Africa we anticipated to have, or the kind of government that the state we are supposed to have.
Absolutely, Abdullahi. Now, let's come back to you, Abdurrahman. I'm told that you have been able to join as well. Can you please say something? Abdurrahman?
Yes.
All right, thank you for joining us, by the way. Now, let's have your thoughts as well. Amnesty International's regional director, Chaguta, said bluntly, speaking out against or scrutinizing government policies carries the risk of either arrest, arbitrary detention, or even death. Now, can you elaborate on how legal instruments like recent cybersecurity laws and internet shutdowns have been used to suppress journalists and activists across East Africa?
Well, whatever has been happening for the last few months and in general for quite a while currently across East Africa has been really horrible. We've seen activists being detained in Communicado in Tanzania while they went to oversee the hearing of an opposition leader who's currently also being suppressed. Across all regions, whether be it Tanzania, be it in Kenya, be it in Somalia, the way the state agencies have used their power to suppress the social media. We've recently seen Tanzania banning the use of X. This is quite common, and it has all the earmarks of an archaic government.
Okay. Now, let's come back to you, Abdullahi, before we move to Mabel. Now, Abdullahi, The Guardian documented at least 82 abductions in Kenya during 2024, many of them tied to the hashtag Reject Finance Bill protests. How have Gen Z's digital movements using satire, memes, and hashtags both influenced and been influenced by the government's tightening grip on online freedom?
Well, thank you for the good question. Kenya is going through interesting times where the current young women and men you see trying, we call them the Gen Zs. These are people who were born in 2000. These are people in their 20s, 25, 24, who got an opportunity to go to school for free, secondary school for free under Kibaki. And today we have seen when the mind is liberated, reason becomes the surface tool to be used in government. So Kenya has been having raw governments. Kenyatta government has been killing people. Pinto was killed in 1965. Oko was killed in 69. James Kiriko was killed in 74. Killing has been there in this country, just like many other parts of Africa. But currently, Kenya is facing a very youthful population who do not care about what you tell them about, They are charged with subclan or this or that. They are reasoning. We have them in our homes. The reason is that they want a better Kenya. They are highly educated. Kenya is among the countries in West Africa and even in Africa, top 5, one of the most educated countries, I think, after South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Egypt. And if you look at the population currently, what they are doing is what we are supposed to do as people who are educated or who are learned. The problem we have in Africa is we have some educated fools as leaders who do not want to take to the truth side. A mind that is educated will reason, a mind that is educated is logic, a mind that is educated, well learned, will reason and have critical analysis of how things are happening. So the Gen Zs have triggered a movement that has started in Kenya in 1992. By the way, these things have not started with the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs were born in 2000, they're about 25 or 30. But Kenya started to have a new political emancipation in 1992 when we repealed Section 2A that allowed us to have a multi-party democracy. We have been grappling with issues of political iniquity. We have been having social injustice, human rights conscious society. So we have been progressively having a society that is mindful of itself. Unfortunately, the elites have decided to advance the me instead of the we, the individualism instead of the communism. So what Kenya is grappling with, what Africa is grappling with, East Africa, is the problem we have as a country or as a continent. That's why today a lot of people are celebrating a very young president in Burkina Faso. Imagine the president of Russia sending a 36-year-old African his jets and fighter jets to safeguard him against assassination from the West. So Africa is awakening. Kenya is among the countries that are, looking at the region and political, liberty of our people as Africans. It is time that we, the people who were born after Julius Nyerere, people who were born after Chinua Achebe, people who were born after all the great guys in Africa, Lumumba, Sankara, all of them, it is time for us to think about an African country where I can drive from Nairobi to Lagos without having any hurdles, without having any insecurity, without being worried of either being kidnapped or killed or tortured, or my organs can be trafficked. So it is time for us, the knowledge to help us. As a Muslim, we are told that it begins with knowledge. If you have knowledge, you must use it to better the society. It is time for Africa. We don't have another time. It is time for us to make sure that our economical discourse stabilizes. Africa has a very youthful population. We have resources. If the resources are ground and we do not have policies and human discipline to explore them, then the policies and the resources will not help us. 60 years after independence, DRC is still poor, and we have one of the most richest countries.
Now let's hear from Maybelline if, it's a similar situation in Ethiopia where the Gen Zs are coming out and speaking and fighting for their rights.
Well, I mean, they would like to. That would be the goal, is to feel free enough that you're able to. This is when we say this is an East African issue, we really truly mean this is an East African issue. Eritrea has been dealing with this for since the beginning of Eritrea, and so this is out the entire coast of East Africa. But no, I don't think Gen Z feels empowered enough. I don't think that Gen Z feels safe enough to be able to speak up against the current prime minister in Ethiopia, let alone the current dictator in Eritrea or many of the other East African countries.
All right, now let's come back to women. Now, a recent data dive by the Coalition of Women in Journalism found that across Africa from 2019 to 2024, 30% of violations against women journalists were physical assaults and 17% were detentions. Now, what specific gender-based risks do female journalists face in East Africa today? Let's start with that.
Sure. Thank you for asking a question specifically when it comes to women's issues, because this is a big, big, big problem for our continent, but specifically in East Africa. Right now, we only have 2 heads of states that are women on the continent, and so that's really disappointing. To be a journalist right now and be able to go through Africa, let alone East Africa, is very difficult. You're having to deal with all of the security problems that a regular woman would have to deal with, as well as trying to get your information in the best way that you can. And so journalists right now have a hard time, and then add to the fact that they're women. And so it's very, very dangerous to be a woman journalist at this moment. There are specific issues that women face that a woman would be able to speak with them about. When it comes to GBV, gender-based violence, or conflict-related sexual violence, which is CRSV, that is a huge, huge problem in East Africa. In Tigray, which is the most northern nation of Ethiopia, there was over 130,000 women who experienced conflict-related sexual violence, which means rape used as strategy. That's a strategic way of winning a war. They used rape against women and children. That includes boys, and women as old as 80, children, girls as young as 4 have to deal with rape that was used as a strategy against them. And so those women would have loved to have spoken to another woman who would have been sensitive enough to understand the type of trauma that they dealt with, but that is really, really hard for women to do when they're still being attacked. And so for a female journalist to be the one to go and get this information would be just that much more difficult. We see it happening in Tanzania, which is really, really disappointing, being that there's a woman president there currently. And so GBV is a huge problem, and it continues to be. I'm not sure what will change it. Our hope is that more women in leadership would change it, but these women who do become leaders and heads of states really do need to speak up on this, and they actually have to do and take action to support other women who are dealing with the same thing.
All right, now, but then are there any protective measures addressing these statistics that we've just mentioned?
Protective measures in which way?
That protects, the women and the journalists who are women.
No, not necessarily. Women are not getting extra security. Journalists in general are not getting extra security. And just because a woman is being the journalist, it doesn't mean that it'll be that much safer. I am not aware of any specific protection for women journalists at all in East Africa.
All right. Now let's hear from you, Abdurrahman. Let's, pick a case. Recently, Ugandan opposition figure Kizza Besigye was abducted in Nairobi and is now facing charges in a military court. In fact, he has even begun or reportedly begun a hunger strike during his trial in a military tribunal, and this is according to his wife. What are its implications for regional cooperation and the East African community's commitment to human rights? Abdurrahman?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I said this gets the picture of Nairobi. Our opposition leader and a very prolific politician is abducted in your country. This is not the first time such kind of cases are happening in Nairobi. We are all aware about Museveni, how he came to power, the number of years currently he's been in power, how the elections are usually conducted in Uganda, how oppositions are usually repressed. But one thing that stands across all East African nations is none of the nations care about what happened in their home soil. They care more about their relationship with the leaders across the other nations, other than preserving the laws that are there to protect whether be it an opposition or a citizen. We've seen it happen. This is not the first time such kind of activities have happened in Nairobi. We've had the execution and the murder of a Pakistani journalist in Nairobi. It was politically motivated. None police or legal authorities have not taken good actions against those who are perpetrated that act. It's pretty appalling.
Okay, so what about the case of, the case in Tanzania of Tundu Lissu? Because so many people have said that Tanzania's president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, was initially seen as a reformer, right? But with opposition leader, because he talked about how oppositions are being repressed. But with opposition leader Tundu Lissu facing treason charges and activists being targeted, would you say that in Tanzania they are witnessing a return to authoritarianism?
Absolutely. I believe Tanzania is returning to totalitarianism because Samia Suluhu, we've had politicians from her government in parliament outwardly calling for the maiming of politicians like Martha Karua. We've had Amina Aisha, a member of parliament from Zanzibar, in parliament stating that Karua and the core should not have left Tanzania in good spirit or in a good condition. They should have been dealt with more horrifically than whatever happened to him happened to her. We've had testimonies from Boniface and Agatha talking about how they were sexually harassed in the hands of Tanzanian authorities. We've seen, as I mentioned earlier, Samia Suluhu shutting down X platform, which is really popular among the youth. I mean, all the marks are there for a regime that is outwardly trying to suppress dissent in whatever means possible.
All right, now coming back to you, Abdullahi, let's come back to, because it seems a lot is actually happening in Kenya. This is why I keep, focusing on Kenya. Kenya has long been viewed as a safe haven for dissidents, right? Now, Amnesty International has actually documented several cases in which refugees and foreign critics have been abducted in Kenya and forcefully returned to their home countries. What does this incidents like these, reveal about the safety of activists who are in exile and the reach of state repression?
That the state, because the nation, where we have almost 58 million Kenyans, is different from the state. The state, the people living in the state, are the people who have not either studied how to develop a good society. We have to value ourselves. Sometimes you ask, what kind of society do you want to have? What kind of norms do you want to, have a society in our government? So the colonial tendencies have not still left our state. If you look at Africa, East Africa is no different. Kenya is slightly economically, in terms of security, its regional influence, it's slightly bigger than our neighbors. Because even our GDP or our budget is close to 6 countries of our neighbors. So it's relatively above most of our neighbors. But now, it used to be that because the society accepted, we Kenyans accepted that we are going to respect human life, we are going to respect people who came. There were Somalis who came from Somalia in 1992, 1993, they were here. There are refugees from South Sudan, those from Sudan currently. There are people from Rwanda, Burundi, DRC. We are all human beings. That's the underlying thing. These colonial maps only show that one state is ruled by certain people and another state. But the people of East Africa are the same. When Museveni came to power, I lived in Busia, Uganda. I started studying when I was young. My father was a businessman. So I was in Busia, Uganda in the 80s when I was young. So when he came to Busia, I still remember I was standing in front of my dad's shop with my mom and dad. That guy is still the president of Uganda. How do you explain that? I mean, does he think that this is a property that belongs to him? The Ugandan government, the Ugandan nation state have existed before him. It's going to exist after him. So it's in Kenya. Suluhu was not elected. She only inherited the presidency after the demise of our former president, And then that is why we are saying as a society, the people in Africa, East Africa are the same. I have traveled through Ethiopia in 2011 from, Jigjiga to, Addis, Peru, all those states. I've gone to Shashamane, to Villa, up to Moyale. I've seen Africa is having problems. And
Abdullahi, just before you go ahead, right, I would also love to hear your thoughts, because I want to paint... I want to paint a picture of how, some of these abductions actually take place. So according to Human Rights Watch, they described the abductors as using unmarked vehicles with changing license plates, making them untraceable. What are your thoughts about, these clandestine modus operandi? I would love to ask all of you, but let's start with Abdullahi first.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the state did not start today. If you look at even medieval, whether it was Hitler, whether it was, in America or United Kingdom, the state always operates in the shadow. If you study government does not like operating within the rings of the law. It operates in the shadow. These are young men who are about 19, 20, and I was told from the security in Kenya, they are between 19 to 29. They are well trained, they are given gas and tarmac, they go do the operations and then they disappear to the field. That is a state. The power has the state to do that. Any other criminal enterprise cannot do that because the state is watching. They track people's phones, they have CCTVs everywhere, they have personal informants, they have CIs everywhere, so there are police in every 10, 20 kilometers. So the state is fearing its people. So instead of protecting them, they want to use fear as a tool to control society. Hitler used it, from Leo Tolstoy to the Machiavellian, all the states that have existed in the last 200 years, in the last 1,000 years, have been using fear of it. And the people who attended parliament in Kenya, majority are dead. Why? Their faces were known, they traced them using the phones, they were disfigured and their body was dismembered and they were put into sacks. So it is incumbent upon the people of East Africa, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenyans, to stand up to the government. The government is not controlled by more than 200 soldiers or about 1,000 or 3,000 people. The entire public service in Kenya is about 3 million. Yet in the private sector and the population is 56 million Kenyans. So the people using this clandestine, these rogue, these night operations, they don't normally do that. They kidnap people one or two during the day, but at night the citizens must also be a bit careful on how they operate, where they pass. You wouldn't just walk anyhow. If you are an activist, I'm a journalist by training. I know that I'm a target of what I'm saying. So you need to, cool enough so that to know. You will die whatever is written for you, but what you need to do is also to put some security measures in place.
Okay.
If they are going to arrest you at least, there should be people, it should be recorded where there are CCTVs, where there are witnesses. You should not walk alone.
All right.
East Africa president and the government are proved to be very wrong.
All right, Abdullahi, thank you for that. So we'll come back to you, Mabel, but we need to go on a quick commercial break now. When we come back, we'll come straight to you. Please stay. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on the conversation. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about concerns about disturbing patterns in East Africa where abductions and torture of activists and journalists actually take place. And we still have our guests with us, Abdurrahman in Somalia, Abdullahi in Kenya, and also Mabel in the U.S. to speak on this. Thank you for staying with us, gentlemen and lady. Now, let's come back to you, Mabel. Just before the break, we're talking about the clandestine operations of state security forces. We heard Abdullahi say that, of course, the government actually operates in the shadows, and they kidnap these journalists and these people, right? Now, I'm going to link this with reports that actually indicate that Kenyan security agents may have been involved in cross-border abductions, including that of Miss Maria Tsehai. Now, Miss Tsehai, or Maria, described being choked and blindfolded by men who demanded access to her phone, which she uses for her activism work and also to contact whistleblowers. So would love to hear your thoughts on, their actions and how, they operate.
I think it's absolutely horrible, and it shows the intention behind it, that there is intention to be as secretive as possible, that the intention is to make sure that they aren't tracked, that they can't be found, that these journalists are lost to time, essentially. It's It's terrifying and it's horrible, and it makes common people feel like they can't speak up either. If journalists are not allowed to do their jobs, if they're not allowed to tell the truth, then a common person who's just going about their day, doing their best to take care of their children, doing their best to survive, will also feel like they don't have that right as well. And so when we're sitting here speaking about East African democracy, that Kenya is a country that is safe, that Ethiopia is a country to go visit, that all these places are beautiful and to come and be a tourist, these people don't feel safe enough to even speak up for themselves. How can that be? You know? And so it's really disappointing that this continues. Again, this is not new. It might be new to a certain few countries in East Africa, but it is not new to overall East Africa. This is a strategy that's been used over and over and over again, and it's incredibly disappointing that it hasn't ended. What we're seeing when we're speaking about opposition groups being quieted, what we're saying is that the old guard will continue to run these countries, and that the old guard feels the only way that they can continue to run these countries is by making sure that there are no opposition to speak up. A lot of the time when it's opposition that's speaking up or trying to run for office, these are younger people. These are people who are going to have to deal with the future, are going to have to deal with the current. And if we're not allowing them to come up and cause change that directly affects them, if we're not allowing women to come and join leadership, if we're not allowing youth to come and join leadership, then there really is no future for us at all, especially for the entire continent. Africa has the largest group of people that are under 40. And all of our prime ministers, the majority of them rather, the majority of the heads of states are all above that age. And so how are they going to speak for this youth that feels so disenfranchised, that feels that they don't have a future, that is not able to find jobs after they've gotten their education? What are these older people going to be able to do for this youth? If they can't run for office, if they can't join leadership, then Africa's future is not as bright as it could possibly be. And so it's really, really disappointing.
Okay, but then what measures can civil society and international organizations, take to protect freedom of expression and assembly in East Africa?
Well, we're doing our best as activists, as civil leaders. We're speaking up. We're joining conversations like this. We are speaking to Western countries, letting them know the issues that are happening. We're speaking to the local people and saying that you do have rights, you can speak up, but when the army is coming down on these people, for instance, in Ethiopia, I know I speak about Ethiopia a lot, it's because I'm Ethiopian, and so I apologize for that.
That's fine.
In the case of Ethiopia, the Oromo people, who are a part of the most southern part of Ethiopia, have a huge population within Ethiopia, feel very, very limited in the ability to speak up against what's happening to them. And that's across the board. The Amhara people are currently at war with Prime Minister Abiy. And when I'm saying with the Prime Minister, I'm speaking with the country. They are having, this small group of people is having to fight an entire nation's army. And that is, how is that possible? How can that be? But that is happening over and over and over again in Ethiopia, from one ethnicity to another ethnicity to another ethnicity. The current Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, is continuing to attack ethnicities with an entire army. And so if that's the reality of every day that's happening in the country, how can they speak up and feel like they have a vote? How can they speak up and feel like their voice matters? And so we can do our best to let people know the powers that they have, but if the world allows these prime ministers, these leaders, to continue to use every single power they have against one small person, what power do we have as civic people? And so we're doing our best, but accountability is really needed for change to actually happen.
Absolutely. Now, back to you, Abdurrahman. Since, the leaders are doing everything to stifle dissent, activists have now resorted to using social media to voice this dissent. Now, how has this digital activism influenced the tactics used by oppressive regimes in East Africa? Abdurrahman.
It's working miracles. I mean, the rejection of the 2024 finance bill was a clear indicator of how the young population can use digital media to gather and express their ideas or their dissent to the government. Not only in we've seen the young population also taking the same stance also in Uganda and also in Tanzania. I believe the youth also use to propagate or display their problems and ideas instead of relying on the mainstream media as a main source of communication. I believe it's doing a wonderful job for the young population in trying to curb the authoritarian regimes in East Africa.
All right, now let's hear the same from Abdullahi, since you're in Kenya. Looking at the rise of digital activism, many governments are now targeting online dissent. How are these activists adapting to this new landscape, and what are the risks for them?
It's a bit different from other countries because here digitally about 38 million Kenyans are connected on smartphones. Majority of them are young. Kenya is below 38, which means they're all younger than me, highly educated. So when you go into these forums, like most of the times you have Twitter or X where people will meet. So what it did is it brought a very contemporary means of gathering without necessarily physically being together. Like the spaces I take part go up to sometimes 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. Sometimes there are forums in this country that go up to 2 a.m. Meaning there are over 5,000 to 10,000 people connected on a space. They are not together. They are all over the world, United States, Europe, part of Africa, Australia. So it has made a revolution in how we meet. For us to talk and make strategies, we don't need to be physically together. So that has caught the government off guard because there is nobody to arrest. People have phones, they have internet, they have power, they are locked in their bedrooms and sitting rooms and offices, in public places. So how do you even arrest 6,000 people, 10,000 people? And in terms of access to information, Kenya's Media and Communication Act of 2013, so we have the Digital Act, we have the Data Protection Act, we are simply having laws that are going to protect these things, and relatively, we have a very highly educated, you saw what happened in Parliament, medical doctors were there, journalists were there, the pharmacists were bringing drugs, ambulances were coming. So the government was caught off guard in the sense that there is nothing they could do because mobilization was taking place on the space. They don't control Twitter. If they shut down Twitter or Facebook or all these, social platforms, then it will anger the people more. Even recently, there are people who wanted to curtail the social media and the internet. We said you can't dare do that. So we are saying that let's not, advance violence and extremism in terms of social media, but let us ask ourselves what kind of societies do we want to have going forward. There is no going back.
Okay. Let's hear from you as well, Maybell, on this, because Amnesty International also noted, that authorities continue to enact tough cybersecurity laws aimed at silencing the media and also controlling information dissemination. What can media outlets do to navigate this dual threat?
So I'm just going to add a little bit about social media, being that it's a part of media in current reality. Social media has become a thing that has been very useful for activists, but it's also something that's been very useful for these terrorist state actors, propaganda machines in different governments. What we saw during the Tigray war was that a huge amount of activists went online, created a bunch of different social media campaigns that were really, really effective and efficient. And then counter to that, we saw the Ethiopian government, the Eritrean government, and different allies create incredible, and very impactful propaganda that shut down a lot of the activist work. And so when we're speaking about social media, we do have to remember that social media is something that's available to everybody, including these governments who have much more power, much more money, much more accessibility, and are able to spread propaganda in a way that is incredible to see. When it comes to traditional media, it has been much harder for traditional media to be able to speak the truth in countries like this. When the Ethiopian government gets a little frustrated or a little nervous about the amount of media that's coming its way, they turn the internet off. And so people who are living in Addis Ababa, who have the most access to the internet, or people who are living in areas outside of it who have much more minimal access to the internet but still have some, won't have it for however long the Ethiopian government feels it's necessary to shut down whatever narratives are being pushed out. And so this is something that's happening in Ethiopia, but it's spreading out. And so we're seeing the Eritrean government do the same. We're seeing a lot of different countries be controlling of their media sources, social media sources, and the overall internet. I think we've come to a place in 2025 where we all understand that the internet is becoming very essential for human lives. Yeah. We need to be able to be on the internet to do anything, essentially, right now. And so being able to turn it off completely and not allowing people to see what's happening around them, be able to speak up about what's happening around them, and just overall taking that control away from them is another way that these governments are minimizing just regular civilian control.
All right. Abdurrahman, earlier we talked about how, activists who were exiled were being abducted and taken back home. For these activists who have actually fled their home countries, seeking safety, can you tell us what measures host communities can actually take to implement and ensure that these exiled activists and journalists are protected?
Just to comment on, I think, just to observe the law of the country that the hosts are coming to, it totally goes against the reasons why do we have the East Africa Community, EAC. The EAC, any person who holds the EAC passport is allowed to travel to all parts of the East Africa as long as he has the legal documents. So abducting, and deporting citizens from your country as a result of the reason being them appearing at a court hearing, which has a lot of question marks on how this politician was arrested, raises a lot of eyebrows. And the thing that worries me the most is when what happens is when the respective nations that these citizens hail from are not taking any measures to try and follow up and make sure that their neighboring countries are observing the rule of law. We've got a lot of legislation problems with the media sector in East Africa. For example, I'm a Kenyan Somali journalist. In Kenya, I think the Media Council of Kenya, the chairman is appointed by the cabinet secretary. So I don't expect the chairman who is being politically appointed to stand for the rights and the problems that journalists are saving full-heartedly. As we all know, whoever pays the piper chooses a tune. So I think we've got to, it all comes down to legislative measures that need to be put in place to protect the activists and the journalists.
All right, now let's hear from you, Abdullahi, especially with the upcoming elections in several East African countries. What are the prospects for democratic reforms and the protection of human rights?
Well, these things take time. You remember any other country, the whole world is going through this crisis. Today, you will hear Trump is having issues with Harvard University. So it's not even something that is only in the developing countries. I mean, if you look at Mexico, Brazil, South Korea, all these institutions, Libya or Syria or Iraq, we are at least better than some countries. If you look at how our democratic process has been developing from 92 to today, it's almost 33 years. Kenya has a very robust constitution called the 2010 Constitution that is very, very transformative in the sense that it was borrowed from South Africa, United Kingdom and US. The courts are more powerful right now. We have more educated society. So what needs to happen is Africans, East Africans to ask what kind of societies and what kind of social norms are we going to accept amidst our own government and society. So when we build, good society, my sister talked about women journalists. Any country that is not respecting its women will not develop. Any country that is not put women first will have issues. So as a country, we will have a very tough election in 2022. You've had 2027, you have had one-term president where most people are against the current president. The opposition is grouping up. It will be interesting time to watch Kenya's politics in the next 2 years.
All right. Coming back to you, Mabel, I would love to have your final thoughts, especially talking about how these abductions are affecting the morale and operations of civil society organizations in East Africa.
Absolutely. I'd like to reiterate what he said earlier about the way that women are treated in our society is a magnifier of what the society is currently in. And so if we continue to disrespect women, if we continue to disrespect the matriarchs, the mothers of the community will not grow. It never will. And so thank you for saying that, and I completely agree. Would you mind re-asking your question? I apologize.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted your final thoughts, especially how, these abductions are affecting the morale and operations of civil society organizations in East Africa.
Absolutely. They are making it not much harder for us to do the work that we need to do, but it's not just affecting our morale. It's not just affecting the activists or the civil societies. It's affecting regular everyday people. There have been women abducted throughout Tigray for nothing, just walking down the street. There have been women who have been kidnapped and raped for days on end post-Tigray war in Tigray. And so this is something that's affecting everyone. It's not just civil society. Civil society is working on it. Civil society is bringing attention to it. Activists are screaming as loud as they possibly can so that somebody would hear them and hopefully take action in changing it. But it is not only affecting us, it affects everyone. And so the morale is very low, and people are feeling as if this is just what it is every single day, and this is what we have to experience, and to do our best to live through that. And so that is a really, really horrible thing to feel on a regular basis, but it is an everybody issue, not just civil society.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Now let's hear your final thoughts as well, Abdurrahman, especially considering the current trajectory. What is the outlook? We'd love to hear your view, the outlook for human rights and democratic governance in East Africa over the next 5 years.
I don't foresee things going well if we go with the current trajectory where abductions are conducted on broad daylight, journalists are being assaulted, whether physically or sexually. There needs to, a lot of changes need to be made by the governing bodies in all countries across East Africa, and the best way we could do that is by urging the local population of each country to vote for morally upright leaders who will hold the law to its status.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for your time and for speaking to us on this. Abdurrahman Yusuf, journalist and producer in Somalia, Abdullahi Alas, governance and policy analyst in Kenya, and Mabel Gebramadine, president of United Women of the Horn and Tigray Action Committee in the U.S. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for today's episode of The Conversation. You can catch up on all missed episodes on our YouTube channel at News Central. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Until I come your way again, I am Darshan Usman. Goodbye and have a wonderful week.